Now, without further ado, if I can have my panelists sort of introduce themselves, we'll start with Nay and just kind of go in sequential order here.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Nay. I'm currently a PGY1 at Washington University. I went to medical school at Emory in Atlanta, and I'm originally from Senegal and Cincinnati, Ohio. So happy to be here. Excited to talk with you guys.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Thanks for having me, Justin, Dr. Hicks. My name is Gabe. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. I went to med school at Brown. Currently a PGY1 at Jeff up in Philly. Very open to answering any questions and happy to answer any questions via text, email, whatever. So if you guys want, just feel free to reach out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janice. I am from the Ohio State University College of Medicine down here at Emory. What else? I'm a PGY1 and I just got off of weekend call. So if people are texting me for any questions to clarify for sign out. So if I pop on and off, that's it. But I'm so excited to see so many people on this call and I hope we're helpful.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kalechi. I'm from Los Angeles, California, Crenshaw District to be specific. I'm at UCSF PGY1, also one here from medical school. So happy to be here.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Barron. I'm also PGY1 at Baylor College of Medicine, which is in Houston, Texas. That's also where I went to medical school, but I'm originally from South Texas, right by the border with Mexico and Texas.
Hey everyone, I'm Steve Canton. I am a PGY1 at UPMC. I'm originally from Pittsburgh. I went to Pitt for medical school. I did get out for a little bit. I went to LSU for grad school and worked in Jersey as an engineer. So any questions you have, more than happy to answer.
All right. Thanks again for all of our panelists. You know, you guys are perfectly primed and unique going through the, virtual sort of process this year. So everyone, please use them as resources, ask questions as we go along, but we'll get sort of right into it now. I guess the first question, where and how many virtual ways did you guys participate in this year? And we can start with Nay.
Sure. So I did 2 virtual rotations, one at WashU and then the other one at Harvard. I kind of did some of the informal virtual activities at UCSF, and then just some virtual meet and greets as well at several other programs, but the 2 main ones were Harvard and WashU.
Cool, I can go next. So I also did 2, also one at WashU, the other one I did at Hopkins. As she mentioned as well, several meet and greets as well. I would recommend you guys go to as many meet and greets as possible. It's always better if more people know you than fewer people. So whenever you have the opportunity, just go to the meet and greets. But yeah, I wouldn't overburden yourself doing too many virtual aways, because a lot of them can be, very long. Go to the ones that, you're very interested in and very invested in. But meet and greets, just go to as many as you can.
I'm a military scholarship student, so my situation is a little different. I was able to do 2 military aways, and because I'm Air Force, one of them was at UC Davis, which is a civilian institution. And so I kind of count that as my, away. So I kind of had one away. And I just think that it was just kind of a shame other people didn't get the opportunity, because you just start to see hospitals differently when you're placed in a system that you don't know anything and you have to figure things out. And I just recommend that if you do have the option to go away. But apart from that, I did 2 virtual aways. And I just got to say, those things are tough. Gabe's telling the truth, because you're on a home rotation, working your butt off. And then at night for 3 hours, twice a week or whatever, you're, doing all this work. And then they have morning conferences, and it's a big responsibility. So don't agree and do a bad job. Only, like Gabe said, do the ones that you actually like. And I went to so many meet and greets. Those gets so exhausting. Emory has some coming up, but just show your face. It's real awkward, but whatever. This has been a year now. You guys know the game.
Yeah, so I actually didn't go to
We can't hear you.
how about now? Can you hear me now? All right, cool. So yeah, I actually didn't do any virtual aways. You know, I was kind of unique in that way. I had a few friends who did virtual aways, and they didn't have, like, similar to what Gabe and Janice were saying. They were just saying like a lot of moving pieces, um, and they just didn't have the best experience on them. So I didn't do too many of those or any of them. But I went to like a lot of socials. It was cool to get my face out there, meet people, social network. But yeah.
I did one away, but it was a very flexible away. They said up front that you're not expected to come every week, and it was more lecture based for learning. So that I used that as a supplement to my rotations at my home institution, which were the only ones I was able to do. And like everyone else said, I was just so busy on my home rotations that I didn't want to overburden myself and overstretch myself committing to something that I ultimately wouldn't do well on. Because even though they were just lectures, you know, you do have to prepare and read a little bit that way in case they ask questions. You can show that you've put in some work into that information. So definitely don't overstretch yourself. Everybody understands that things are difficult with virtual settings, and do what you can do well.
Yeah, I did 2 flexible aways. I say flexible because I kind of like slid in there last minute. I didn't really know what was going on. So I did a flexible away at Rush, and I did a flexible away at USC, which was kind of the best of both worlds because I didn't have a huge burden to my schedule, but I also got a feel for those institutions, how they conduct their didactics and things of that nature. So if you can get a flexible one, do that. There are benefits, I think, to doing the official ones because when I was on those away rotations, some of those people were doing presentations and getting their names out there, and those are some of the places they match. So kind of just play it by ear and see how your schedule's going. But it worked out. So, I mean, I recommend somehow getting your face to some of these institutions.
Perfect. I'm actually soon to be publishing a paper on this. I think some of you guys probably filled out a survey on it, but similar themes. It seemed that, you know, the virtual away, like the traditional way, was kind of burdensome for most people, but the sort of meet and greets and sort of sessions like that seem to be more, you know, more well liked by students. As a follow-up question to that, do you think the virtual ways made a difference, particularly in terms of either getting an interview or matching at a program?
Yeah, I can kind of speak to this. I think, generally speaking, I kind of was saying this in the chat too. The more face time you have with the program, especially consistent and with just one resident, but like several residents and some of the attendings, so they know your interests. If it's a program that you're really interested in, that's going to go a long way. But these virtual rotations and even some of these virtual meet and greets, there are like a lot of people in them. And no, I don't know of any programs aside from the ones that Janice mentioned, who might promise you an interview because you were supposed to go on an in-person rotation and the application fell through. But there are no guarantees outside of that. I don't think you should bank on it just because you did a virtual rotation there, but it doesn't, I will say it doesn't hurt.
And then traditionally, sort of the in-person sub-internship or away rotation has been the best way for both program directors and students to sort of get a feel for programs. So I know Janice had the ability to rotate in person, but for those who did not, how did you get a good feel for the culture? How did you find out what the residents were like? Sort of touch on that for the students for programs that they won't be able to actually rotate.
So earlier, you touched upon the Gladden directory, and I can't, say it enough how important and pivotal that Gladden directory truly was. I mean, just cold emails to some people sometimes, a lot of the time people aren't gonna respond, but sometimes they will. You gotta just latch on to those who do respond. And, from that, going from that, reaching out to residents, just talking to them, like whether it's once, twice, or 3 times, just to get a sense of, what type of person they are, and then also the type of people that they all have alongside them in the program. And then going off of that, in addition, there obviously are a lot of attendings on that directory as well. So reaching out to the attendings and just getting their sense of what the program is like as well goes a long way.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that. Oh, sorry, Olivia, you want to go? Okay, just to piggyback off that, I say, just talk to as many people as possible at all levels. I think that was the most helpful for me, especially when you start like narrowing in on institutions that you're interested in, because it can be overwhelming to try to contact people at all levels at all the schools you're applying to. But once you start narrowing in on like 3 to 5 schools, I was like, let me talk to the interns to see how they're kind of adapting, ask where they're from. Are you from a big city moving to a smaller city and vice versa? How are you adapting to that? How are you adapting in terms of being a minority? And then, of course, it's important to ask like the seniors how they feel, because the interns really are fresh and they're not having that full experience yet. So I thought I got a lot of insight from the seniors as well. And I thought it was also important to talk to people that have matriculated through the entire program, like attendings that have gone to those schools, and when they look back, how do they feel the program prepared them? So those are some of the things that I think really helped me narrow in on institutions and ultimately make my decision.
Absolutely. I was just going to add that this is the season to be proactive, to email, to call. I recommend calls. I think emails are a great way to reach out to somebody, but I always prefer face-to-face or over the phone actual communication, because you get a lot more information and a better gestalt of the person in the program. And even if you feel like your network is really small, start with whoever you know. Start with an upperclassman at your school. Start with the attending at your program. Start with the co-resident at your virtual away. Use everybody that you know that is affiliated in ortho to plug you in somewhere. I remember one of my friends went to medical school in Pennsylvania, and she knew somebody who matched at a program in Texas I was interested in, and she got me in contact with her. So yeah, like I said, this is time to be proactive, really reach out to anybody and everybody you can.
And I really can't reiterate that enough for the students. What we learned this past year is, being proactive, being a self-advocate was like probably the most important, characteristic, because you don't have that FaceTime. And otherwise you're just sort of a name on paper. So if people have interacted with you throughout the last few months or so leading up to interviews, and then once they're trying to decide who to take, I felt like that made a huge difference this year. What were
Just to quickly add on to that, if you don't mind, just appreciate it, man. So like on top of what everybody else said, just cold calls, cold emails to individuals. I also really use like the ortho spreadsheet. It's like an ortho math spreadsheet that I put in the chat, and it pretty much just gives you like a nice scouting report on each program, like the fields of the program and things of that nature. And I found that to be pretty accurate for the most part. So yeah, that was like a really amazing resource. And then also just like reaching out to people like in my program, because they have like connections from, like they may went to school with somebody who's at Stanford or like these other different institutions, and from there like I got to contact with people, talk to people on the phone for hours and hours on end, and I feel like that kind of just gave me good perspectives on other programs.
Very true, very true. The good old ortho spreadsheet, infamous. So let's see, what were some of the characteristics you guys were looking for in programs, whether that be size, location, operative experience? Could you guys touch on that and maybe why you guys chose what programs you chose to train at?
I can start. I was very type A about this. I made an entire spreadsheet. So if you're those people, don't feel bad. Do it systematically if you have to. But I wrote a list of all the factors that were important to me in a program. Some of the top ones were diversity, not just ethnicity, but also female-male ratio, and whether that was a new change or an old change. And also their volume. I really want to leave residency being a good surgeon. For me, research is important, but I don't want that to be the primary focus of my residency. Location and size were a factor for me. Some programs only have 2 residents a year. Some programs have 10, 15 residents a year. And then lastly, culture was a big one for me.
Yeah, I can probably echo all of that. Those are some of the same things that I look for in a program. I really wanted a program that had a great amount of breadth and depth in all of the subspecialties, so that, going in as a PGY1, not knowing what specialty you want to go into, you at least have a good exposure to all of them and can make a well-informed decision your fourth year when you're applying for a fellowship. And diversity was also pretty big for me, just kind of having that community and having it being something that isn't new to the program was also pretty important for me. And then location, I think being able to be close to home was more important this time around. Just being able to know that, residency can be, it is difficult. So that's just facts. And being able to go home or like have people around you who you can reach out to when things are getting kind of tough. So those are some of the things that were important to me.
Yeah, I'll echo everything that was said as well. I think volume was, very important to me as well. I kind of have a good sense of what I want to do. So I wanted to make sure that the place where I ended up would be, solid in that subspecialty. So that was one of the big things for me. And then, as they both have mentioned, location was very important as well. Just wanted to make sure that, wherever I ended up, I had support.
And I'll actually add one more thing. The patient population that the residency program saw was very important to me as well. I really have a passion for underserved and marginalized populations. And so if the residency program was a little skewed to the opposite direction, I tended to not rank them as high or apply there.
For me, I guess how I narrow things down evolved over time as I talked to more people. But at baseline, I would just tell people that I wanted to go to a big city that had good brunch, because I really I just want to be in a place where if I walk outside the hospital walls, I'll have a good time. And if anybody that has good brunch probably has good people, I would think. So that was really what was my standard. And then kind of I narrowed down places that had good technology. I enjoy research, things of that nature, but it really can be quite simple as you go down, as you get closer to choosing your school.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add, just echoing what everybody else said. My process was very similar to Olivia's. I kind of had an Excel spreadsheet. It was broken down into sections. I had training, reputation, camaraderie, fit, location, and then special considerations. I kind of put each one on a scale of 1 to 10. And then after that, just added them all together to figure out which one was best for me. So yeah, and then also just the population that the institution served, because again, I'm also from a underserved area, and I care about serving those people as well. So I wanted to make sure that was also at the forefront of whatever program I was blessed to be a part of. So it's also why I chose UCSF, a little plug.
Beautiful. I will say, throughout this process, as you guys are evaluating these programs, I think honest introspection is important. So you need to be honest with yourself. Do you really fit in a program that has, 20 residents? Do you work better in a team that's more, family oriented with just 3 residents? Do you learn better by watching or, sort of hands-on? You have to figure out what's best for you. And then that way you can, you'll narrow it down and figure out the best program fit for you as well. One common theme that surfaced a lot was sort of communication. I tend to break up communication in 3 phases: pre-interview, interview, and post-interview phase. But if you guys could touch on just sort of communication with programs, how you did it, the timing of it, and who you were communicating with.
I'll take that. So I think for me, I did a lot. I was really front heavy on the communication. I reached out to a lot of people very early on, and coming from a school that has a pretty prominent, to say the least, chairman and Dr. Freddie Fu, just being around him and knowing how he kind of operates, I kind of had a decent idea of how other chairmen and other program directors operated. So it made me more comfortable reaching out directly. You know, that's debatable. Some people say don't do that. I definitely reached out. If I didn't get a response, I kind of was, you know, it was easy to filter out that program, right? And so, I mean, those are some of the things. And then during the interview process, for me, it was, like I said, more so reaching out to the residents and people that had gone to that program, or even like Dr. Hicks. I would reach out to him like weekly, asking him about other programs, because it's a very small world. And so everybody on this call wants you to go to the best program for you. So if you reach out and ask certain things about programs during the cycle, we'd be more than happy to give you candid feelings. And I think it's important to get that from everyone, because everybody has things that are interested in. Like for me, I want to be in a big city, that the school that had good trauma and good brunch. That might not be the program for everyone. So I would just get a lot of different opinions and perspectives.
Yeah, I definitely front loaded as well. Try to go to the meet and greets, try to connect with people. And then if I had an interview at the program of somebody I knew or had connected with, I let them know like, hey, I'm excited to be interviewing. Are you going to be there that day? Will I see you on the resident social? Just to engage them again. And that way they knew I was excited about that interview at that program. And then afterwards, well, there's a whole debate about post interview stuff, so I won't get into that right now.
Yeah, I think everybody's hitting the nail on the head. You just gotta, once those connections are formed, you just gotta maintain the connections. And don't just like let one email slip by, send one email and then like trail off with an attendant, especially an attendant. If you know, form that connection and they respond to you, you know, keep emailing them. I mean, not like incessantly, but email them like once every 2 months, like like if you're a third year, if you're a fourth year coming up on applications, like stay in their inbox like once a month. As your interview comes up, let them know you're about to interview there before you go, not after you go. Because you know, some people, some attendants might even take that to heart, to be honest with you, if you've been in contact with them and you don't talk to them before your interview. So just make sure that, you know, you stay in contact with people who have helped you along the way, especially.
Yeah, definitely on that note, I would definitely say utilize your networks early on. So Anthem mentions Robert Gladden Society, all of those things. They have connections to these programs, deep connections, deeper than you probably could even imagine. And so I would reach out to them early and often to figure out, tell them what you're interested in, why, and they can pretty much plug you into certain attendings to give you a good chance of getting interviews at those institutions.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that, just because you talk to one person and you come out of that conversation with like 2 or 3 other contacts that you need to reach out to, or that can help you with a different program. And I appreciate that a lot when I was applying, because people really do just want to see you succeed. And if you tell them what you're interested in, what your priorities are, they might have and people and contacts for people who may better fit that mold for you. Or so just, it's not just talking to them just for their advice, just for their unique experience, but they can get you in touch with a lot of different resources as well.
And just the perspective from the other side, you know, when it comes down to making decisions, like those conversations come up. So, you know, if you know, 2 candidates are pretty similarly ranked and one candidate hasn't reached out to anybody at all and one's constantly talking to people, you know, that comes up in the decision room. So, you know, those things are important. I'll also echo the fact that if you don't reach out to someone either prior to rotating or prior to interviewing, and then just kind of show up and people see you, that doesn't look good. So definitely reach out beforehand if you can. Like Steve said, there's, you know, like we're a resource of Gladden Society. They've all provided their email addresses. The ortho world is small, like we all know each other. So there's really no excuse to, you know, show up somewhere and you haven't really talked to someone at the program to sort of get the skinny on what things are going to be like once you're there, whether that's a rotation or an interview. For the next topic.
Just one thing to add,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So just like after the interviews are all done, it's just really nice to send like a thank you email to like everybody who you saw on that day,
Right.
because they're giving their time to communicate with you, to sit down and engage, and it can be a lot off their plate. So I would email every single person I talked to, as well as like the coordinators of it all, and they all really appreciated that. Like I want to say like 80% replied, and they're really happy about that exchange. So just wanted to put that out there.
All right.
Also figure out which schools don't want that.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I feel like UCSF might have been one of the schools that said don't email them, but I could be completely wrong.
And that's true. That's the one school that said not to. You're right, bro. But every other school, I did that. But you got a good point. That's the one
Okay.
school.
Yeah, just make sure.
Sure.
And that's where your residents come in too. So, because programs will say like, don't email us, or and someone will say don't email us, but they actually do respond well to an email. So, talking to the residents, they can a lot of times give you the behind the scenes sort of inside scoop. Someone was just trying to clarify exactly when you should be reaching out. Again, I think it's different phases. So right now it's the pre-interview phase. So right now is a good time to be reaching out to residents, to be reaching out to residency directors and things as well, and just sort of forming relationships. Before your interview, like Gabe said, to sort of reach out to people before showing up or before logging in for your virtual interviews. Sometimes they'll give you a rundown of what the interview day is like. So just kind of be in constant communication with people. Everyone here, is trying to help you out. And then post interview, that's where it can be quite variable. It's kind of it's a skills, a formula that's not totally figured out. But I think staying really close to the residents, especially they're at the program, they can help you, ascertain when to reach out in terms of the post interview phase. If no one else has anything else to offer to that, we'll move on to sort of ladders of recommendation. Most students are in the sort of away rotation, sub-I season. So how should they be asking for ladders of recommendation, and who should they be asking for ladders from?
Okay, I can start with this. So letters of recommendation, I think this is just so important, because this is basically, okay, this is basically the attendings who you've worked with for a longitudinal amount of time, ideally. And sometimes that's hard to get depending on when your interest in ortho began or anything like that. But what you want to do is identify those mentors as soon as you can, whether it's during MS 2, 3 year, and then cultivate those relationships. And when you're asking somebody for a letter of recommendation, you want to make the job as easy for them as possible. So you're providing them with everything that you have built in your portfolio thus far, whether that's your personal statement. That doesn't have to be polished and perfect. If you have a first or second draft of that, I recommend sending that to them, so that they kind of, if you've only worked with them for 2 weeks on like a sub-I, and you really had a good time with them, but they don't really know the ins and outs of your personality and like your life, that personal statement gives them an extra piece to your puzzle to kind of write about you, and just make it easy for them. And don't be scared to reach out to them about the deadlines. Make their job as easy as possible so that they can write you a good letter. And when you're asking for someone to write you a letter of recommendation, kind of take a second and think about, okay, one, do I feel like this person's going to write me a great letter of recommendation? And two, how do I kind of confirm that? And there's nothing wrong with asking, hey, do you feel comfortable writing me a strong letter? And I think, there are varying opinions about this, but I think it's good to just don't be like, oh, I worked with this person for a month. They should definitely be able to write me a good letter, because that's a big risk. And these letters are very important, and you really need to pick and choose who you're giving that much power in your application. So I would just, those are the two things that I think are important to think about.
I'm really, like, I have strong beliefs when it comes to this. Like Nay said, most of it, I agree with everything she said. The thing I tell like some of my mentees, because one of them was like, oh, she's Gen Surge, but she's like, oh, I'm rotating with the chief of Gen Surge at Ohio State. And she's like, I'm gonna ask him for a letter. And I was like, after 6 OR days, like I tell her, and I'll tell all y'all, do not ask anyone for a letter who you wouldn't ask to get on the phone and call your program. So I never asked anyone unless I knew when I applied and I said, hey, I really want to go to Emory, they would get on the phone and be like, Janice really wants to go to Emory. So I think that's the barometer you need to lay at, especially if virtual or hybrid. They don't really get to know you. So my attending saying she is the most hardworking medical student, whatever, I don't know what they said, but that carries weight because they know her or him. And so, but if they just said like she was a good medical student, the gravitas is lost. So really think about who you'd want to call on the phone for you, or who would.
I also let one of my letter writers who is busier know that I was interested in working with them. And then I think the first day I worked with them from that week, I let them know like, hey, if we have enough time this week, I would love a letter from you. And I think that helped him be more attentive to our time together. And then when I asked for the letter, of course, I sent my CV, sent, personal statement, little biography about myself. And I also told him, I enjoyed doing this case with you, or dropping the little hints to help him remember exactly what we did that week to give him some material to use.
Yeah, I followed all those same things. The thing I would add is just make sure you know how things are set up at your institution. For instance, everybody from UPMC gets letters from Dr. Hogan and Dr. Fu. So sometimes they do a joint letter, sometimes they do separate. So that's already one or two. So now you're thinking of one or two other letters. For me, it was another attending that I had built a longitudinal relationship with. And then the fourth one for me was kind of just like a wild card because most schools take three. So I got 3 ortho. And you can get like the fourth can be maybe your research mentor, another orthopedic surgeon, which could also be both. For me, I actually chose somebody that I had worked with since my first year, who actually was an OB-GYN. And people would say, well, like, why would you do that? Well, it was somebody that could really speak to my work ethic since day one of medical school. And I remember on like 2 of the interviews, people said my application stuck out because I got a letter from somebody that was in a different field. So that might be a strategy you take if there's somebody that could write you a strong letter. I know that's also debatable, but you'll find like during this process, you take a lot of inputs and then you decide what's best for you. And so I thought that would be a good letter, and it turned out to be a good one for me. So think about that as well.
I just wanted to echo that. My 4th letter was from an anatomy professor who I developed a good relationship with, and I knew that there were some academic aspects of my application that I thought he could address well in a letter, and I think it worked because I matched. But also, I wanted to share one more thing that I just forgot. Sorry, I'm keeping an eye on my dogs and making sure they're not destroying anything. Yes, definitely know how your program does their letters. If you need a chair letter and your program doesn't give you one, ask your program director or somebody in the administrative side to how you can get that for your applications, because some programs do require specifically a chair letter.
I agree. I think, like you guys are saying, a lot of programs, probably most programs, actually do require the chair/PD letter. So that's one letter right off of the top. And then I think Eric's iPhone, I think that's Dr. Carson. He's wanting us to say that, you should definitely be asking, can you write an excellent letter? So also views from the other end. Sometimes the letters aren't, well written, or you can tell that there's not like a strong relationship there. So kind of like Janice was alluding to, don't just rotate with a chairman or someone with a big name and ask them for a letter just because of sort of their status. Make sure that the letter is going to be a great letter and an excellent letter. If you did research at NIH and they're not even in ortho, but they can write a strong letter about your skills and you as a person, that's going to go, much further than, a wishy-washy letter from someone you spent 3 days with. Can you guys speak on the sort of standardized letter recommendation format, the AOA format, versus just having someone write a letter? Did you guys do both? How did you guys proceed with that during this cycle?
I think a lot of programs this year, at least this past cycle, wanted the standardized letter, the ESLOR. So I just ended up just having all of my letter writers just do the standardized letter. And if they wanted, they could attach, you know, a normal, quote unquote, normal letter to the end in the narrative section. But I would just recommend just to play it safe, because I know there are a lot of programs that require the standardized letter. Just go ahead and like let all your letters writers know to just right off the bat, just do the standardized one.
I agree. Dr. Harrington is our program director, and he recommended all of us to have our letters as the standardized one. Some letter writers are not used to that, so I would definitely anticipate needing to explain the steps and maybe tell them that you want it in earlier than when it's due. That way, if there's issues, like me, 5 o'clock before applications are due, missing a letter, you don't run into those issues.
One point Dr. Carson just brought up too, an aspect of that letter is it has separate boxes for, you know, ranked to match, highly ranked, like top third, etc. And if your letter writer is not familiar with, you know, that form, they need to know that it should say ranked to match. And it's kind of weird because like everyone that writes the letter, they don't necessarily rank applicants at their program, but when that form is reviewed by interviewers, they're looking for it to say rank to match. Highly ranked is okay, but once you go below that, if they see that, especially at our program, you're probably not really going to be considered. That's not a strong ladder. So just make sure your ladder writers know that, because they can actually hose you unintentionally by selecting the wrong box. I guess to lighten up a little bit, what were some things that you guys did to look good on your sort of virtual interviews and things? Were you guys buying like ring lights? And, you know, I'm a little old school. I didn't have a ring light. I had a lamp just sort of sitting above my computer while I was interviewing you guys. But let us know some of your strategies you guys did to stand out.
I guess start off with that one. So for me, you know, I kind of did not you know, pitch any pennies on it. I got like a ring light. I'm talking the virtual background. You boil it off. And then, you know, on Zoom, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a way to like adjust the lighting, especially for us like more melanated folks. Sometimes we gotta like have fun with that. So if you go to like video settings, you can like adjust the lighting and everything. There are like different filters as well. So I have fun with it.
Yeah, get that ring light if you were any sort of melanated. It helps.
Ring light and advice that Dr. Wells actually gave me from Penn. He said that he would recommend finding kind of a blank background. A lot of people, and I follow like Rate My Skype Room or whatever on Twitter, where like they have really, a lot of people like get creative and it's like a bookcase and like a water fixture and whatever. And he was like, it's kind of distracting when you have 4 minutes with whoever in the program. You want them focusing on you and what you're saying and not like everything happening in the background. This wasn't my background. So but yeah, so I just did a plain, keep it simple, and yeah, ring light.
Yeah, I agree with what Janet said. I just had a plain white background too. I think that was, I don't know, that's just my style, but I like the plain background.
Yeah, my background would be too busy, so don't do this. Definitely log into Zoom and see how you look before you start your interview every single time. Doesn't matter, it's the 50th interview, every single time, log in first. Be aware of your noise. If you have a dog, maybe someone can take the dog for a few hours, or if you need to go to school and book a room because that's the only quiet environment you can find, do that. Definitely don't skimp on the ring light. Some have more like brown light or soft light. Anyway, there's ways to make sure your face is well visible. I will say I had one friend who had a ring light, but their room was kind of dark and it just looked like they were a prisoner in a cell somewhere. So make sure all of your light is good, not just the ring light. And then dropping good money on a webcam is worth it right now. So I think I bought one for like $100, which is a lot for a medical student, but it was worth it for me because the place I lived just had terrible lighting. So yeah.
I think another thing that I don't want to forget to say is buy an Ethernet cable. Don't depend on any Wi-Fi. I don't care how strong your gig or whatever bytes or however how Wi-Fi works is. Just get an Ethernet cable. You can plug it up to your router, and that's just the most reliable Wi-Fi connection you can have. I learned this during the virtual rotation and meet and greets where I was literally like cutting in and out, and I had no idea. People were telling me like, "Nay, we cannot hear you," and I was like, "Okay, thanks." So ever since then, I was just like plugging up my computer to the Ethernet cable, and that saved me a lot of anxiety because you just don't know. Like you might feel like you're good and you're breaking up on everybody else's end, and it just looks bad. So get an Ethernet cable.
Two things. I'm talking a lot, but one, I have this right now. It's on top of my Millers, but prop your laptop on something so you're not like, I don't know, in their face like that. Like it's weird. And then the second thing is just nay, because I had the worst experience. What she's saying is real. I didn't know what an Ethernet cable is, but read it up on it and get one because it was my interview day. And my mom's a teacher, and during COVID, teachers were home and we were both trying to use the internet at the same time. And I was more than half an hour late to my interview. So, and it was a school I really, really liked. So, I mean, things happen. So just prepare as if that's going to happen to you.
Yeah, I'll say anything you need to do to look good, because I mean, I feel like in the beginning, everybody was using an excuse, like we're not used to this virtual stuff and what have you. But at this point, I mean, I think everybody does it. If something goes wrong on any type of virtual experience, you're getting judged. Like you're just like, oh, you're not prepared for this. And so we're at this point, if you're not ready for the virtual interview, if it doesn't look good or whatever, they're judging you for that just as much as they're judging your attire. So do whatever you need to do to make it look good. I remember on a number of interviews, I think, I'm not putting names out there, but there was like a couple people that had great like setups. And every time they got on, it was constantly great. And it stood out to me. So it had to inevitably stand out to the interviewers. So just take the time to do it.
I agree. So, that's why we got you guys here, tips and tricks. I'm definitely old school. I did not have a ring light, had an old lamp, but you gotta do something. Definitely want to stand out any way you can. Can you guys touch on how many programs you all were applying to, and maybe how you were applying? Was it toward regional based? What were your thought process going into submitting your application?
I can start because I did 2 different matches and it'll probably not apply to anyone. I did the military match in December, and we have to apply military and civilian, and got so for that we only have 2 programs, which is why they tell us also apply civilian. So for my civilian programs, I applied to 38, I think it was. Hawaii was a long shot, but I also added Hawaii. That was the only thing not in the Midwest or near family. I just asked myself, like, would I uproot my life to go anywhere besides Ohio State? Because I really liked my home program. So if it didn't meet that bar, I wasn't going to apply. And you have to sit with yourself and your situation and decide that. But don't make it based on money because you're going to be in debt anyway. I'm sorry. Like the transition from Med 4 to intern year is like expensive. So don't nickel and dime yourself with that. But actually think about the fact that like, if you get all of your interviews, will you actually take them? And 2, if they offered your position, would you actually go? I wasn't going to move to Oklahoma, so I didn't apply to Oklahoma. And I kind of made those decisions like that.
I was the opposite. I applied to close to 90 programs and it evolved. I started with, oh, I'm gonna do a solid 50 and be good. And then I talked to somebody who didn't know me very well, but gave me application advice and told me I should be applying to more than 60, way more above 60. So then I jumped up to like 70. And then a few weeks before the application process, all my co-residents, or students applying with me like really stressed me out, and I added 20 more. I don't think the last 20 or 30 really got me that many more interviews. So don't stress apply like I did. I don't recommend, and it just costs a lot of money for no reason. I think 60 is like the top recommended number, and I think if you apply smartly and you talk to your mentors about your choices, that should be a good number for you. And I wish I had stuck with that.
So I'm a big Kobe fan. I applied to 81 programs, and that's why I went with that number. But I would say, you know, there was the advice this year to, you know, if you had above a 235 to apply to 40, if you had above a 2, or if you have below a 235, apply to only to 60 at the most. And I was just told, like, by my attendants, you know, that's a suggestion. Like, don't listen to, you know, that advice necessarily, because other people aren't going to listen to it. And nobody but you can see how many you applied to. So with that said, you know, I would say, you know, at some point you have to kind of trust your gut as well. Like, yes, gather information from people and, you know, make sound decisions based on the advice that you receive. But at the end of the day, you're an adult and you know your own situation as well. So, you know, if you know you need to apply to more programs, then do so. Don't just listen to someone who, you know, necessarily is telling you, hey, you only need to apply to 15, like you're going to do well. So just make a sound and reasonable decision based on your situation.
Yeah, I agree with everything Gabe said. I ended up applying to 36 programs, and I will say there was like a stress factor after I submitted my application, like, wait a minute, what did I just do? And so you don't want to ever look back and ask yourself this question, like, if there's a program, you're like, would I rather not match or match at this program? And if you're okay with not matching, if that's a better alternative than matching at that program, then like you can take that risk. But I think you don't want to apply to too few programs where you look back and you're like, dang, like I really played myself in this situation. So those recommendations are just recommendations. And there are a lot of other people applying, and most of them will not take that advice. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by trying to, you know, do this mental math of like what your chances are, you know, cast a wide net, and but also be reasonable and like don't be kind of think about your things that you're really interested in and gear your numbers towards that too.
Yeah, I actually also applied on like the lower end. I applied to about 38 programs, and it was a little risque, but you know, I just had that faith, and thankfully it worked out. Yeah, and I was kind of broke.
Yeah, I took the advice of some of my close mentors. I did 40. You know, after the, you know, that whatever that was called was like the single interview, that when they send out all the interviews, that was nerve wracking because I'm like, you know, right when that morning hit, I was like, should I apply to more? But I mean, it really, at the end of the day, you just gotta, you know who you can trust, and most of all, who you can trust is yourself the most, and you know yourself. So, and I know it's kind of difficult because most people are coming into this process not knowing what's going to be on the other end. And so if you talk to people that have been close to this process, they can probably give you some decent advice as to how many schools to apply to, especially if you have schools that are really, at least in the beginning, telling you, you know, they're interested in you, then you can have some confidence in applying to maybe less programs. But at the end of the day, you know, whether you match or not is really, you know, I would say up to you. So if you want to apply to 90 schools, I'm sure all of us have wasted money in other ways. So at the end of the day, just spend that money and, you know, get it done.
I think a common thread here is, you know, talk to your mentors. They've kind of seen the process year after year, and they can give you a lot of advice on that. Talk to people who either look like you, or advise people look like you as well, because sometimes it may be different for sort of a Black male applying, or even a white female applying. Try to get that advice, because you know this device is not the same for every applicant. And then another thing I just wanted to mention was this year was different. Some of our old rules did not necessarily apply this year. So, applying to maybe 60 or so programs was probably a good look this year. We're doing a lot of research now to try to figure out, what went well, what went bad. But sort of I saw a lot of students who didn't match this year with like 230s who applied to, 30 or so programs. So just kind of be careful and keep that in mind as well. And, we're all here for you too. So if you just need to bounce ideas off of people or, get more advice, please reach out. Let's see, did you feel you got a significant amount of interviews from any programs that you applied to if you did not communicate? So I guess asking, did you feel like communication beforehand helped you get interviews?
Just briefly, I'll say, so I think I got about like 15 interviews, and about like 10 of those interviews from programs that I did not have any prior communication with. So, that's my answer to the question. I don't think communication is essential, but it helps. And it also helps you just get like a feel of the program. But I don't think it's essential to get an interview.
I think for smaller or newer programs, if you've communicated with 2 or the residents or more, and you're showing interest, that helps. But I agree. I think most of my interviews were places I had not communicated with, and then a handful were places I had talked to.
And then another point, just communication. So even after you apply and then interviews are going out, if you don't get an interview from somewhere and you feel like your connections or your mentors have connections there, let them know. Sometimes, things can happen. There's like tons of people within each department that review applications, and sometimes people just, fall through the cracks. So don't just take no, the initial no as a, end all be all. I wouldn't necessarily reach out to the program, but I would reach out to sort of mentors to see if they can sort of advocate on your behalf.
I wanted to say one thing to that. Yeah, it's like low key, there was one program that like I really wanted to go that I was thinking about I don't know, I was really interested in, and they're holding out on me. So I just emailed the program and I got an interview. So there's hope.
Oh my gosh, wait, similar. There was one program that I was like, oh man, they didn't send me an invite. I'm never gonna hear back. And then just for some random reason, because a lot of my friends were like getting trickles. And I was like, all right, so the trickle exists. So I sent, I shot my shot, sent an email, and the PD was like, Janice, if I was waiting for you to send like a personal whatever. And if you had sent it like last week, because we just finished our last interview, and I was like, wow, like, so do reach out after you get that first batch. I would say that weekend, send to your top 3 or so that you didn't hear back from, because I didn't know that was what they were expecting. I would have sent tons of emails.
Shooters gotta shoot.
Also talk to your co-applicants. If you have a good cohort, my cohort at Baylor was really supportive, and we talked to each other. If we couldn't make an interview, we would ask somebody like, is this a program somebody is interested in? And we try to, get their name into the program, let them know, hey, I can't make it, but there's another student from my school, so I'm really qualified if that's interested in your program. So advocate for each other.
Perfect. What are some tips that you guys can provide? Right now, interviews are probably still going to be virtual, but either way, interviewing is pretty similar. How are you guys preparing for your interviews?
So, okay, just in general, things you can do to prepare. There are certain questions that you're probably going to get asked at every interview. The tell me about yourself, the why orthopedics, why our program, tell me about a time when. So just have your generic responses at least drafted for those kinds of questions, and then take time out to look yourself in the mirror and practice those answers. Because you can write it out and be like, all right, I got this. And then the minute you get asked that question, you start like stammering and like you're really just zoned out. It doesn't come as naturally as you might think. It requires practice. Go to as many mock interviews that your school provides as possible. I know the Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society provided some mock interviews. Just any avenue that you have to practice, you should take them up on it. You can never have too much practice, and it just makes the actual interview day a lot less stressful when you can kind of anticipate those questions and have a good answer lined up for it. There's obviously going to be some questions that you're never going to be prepared to answer, and that's okay. Those are going to be fewer and far between. So don't like kick yourself when you get those questions. Just like do your best and like smile. Oh, and another thing, like smile, like just be smiling all the time. I don't know. It just makes a difference. I feel like when people like you're at these interviews, it's going to be like your X number interview, you're tired of all this virtual stuff, but go in there and smile and look like you want to be there, look happy, look excited, be enthusiastic. That goes a long way. I got asked like random riddles, and in that like high, like stress environment, I'm not answering any riddles correctly. I can't do math suddenly, but I'm smiling and I have a good energy and I'm trying my best. And I think that goes a long way too. So just like keep that good energy and come as prepared as possible about know your application in and out. I will say that too. So yeah.
I'll piggyback. Couple of things. So I'm a little type A. So for every program, I made a document like I really liked Iowa's program, for example, but I thought it was in Des Moines. It's not. So like literally it was called like a spec sheet. So I would be like Iowa spec sheet or ME spec sheet, like capital, Atlanta, airport, whatever the airport is, because I wanted to like look like I researched, man. And then for every school, I would have like specific questions. They would sometimes you wouldn't know who's interviewing you, but I would know if they have star faculty and then be like, oh my gosh, like you do limb salvage, like blah, blah, blah. I knew some of them who went hiking. Like Facebook is free, y'all. Like do what you can to make that connection, because this is virtual and everyone's life is kind of out there, especially attendings on Twitter. At Emory, all of them are required to even have a Twitter. So like you can find things out about people. So that's one. Two, I was trying to find one of my interview spec sheets, but there's a list on Reddit of like tons of questions. One of the ones that I would get a lot is to tell me about whatever research you've done from beginning to end. So doesn't necessarily have to end in publication, but pick one that's like a meaty example of you like formulating an idea and carrying it out to whatever the fruition was. Like Nay said, you really have to know your application. It's you. You don't want to sound rehearsed, but you are a little bit of an actor, because after the 7th why orthopedics, there's no way you just had to put on a smile and be like, oh my gosh, first time ever hearing this. Kind of like when you go into a patient room for an OSCE. That was kind of how I approached it.
And just as another testament to the importance of reaching out to people, reach out to not only residents at these programs prior to your interview, but also to, if they have multiple interview days and one of your classmates already interviewed, ask them about it. Because sometimes they'll have like a skills room, even in the virtual setting, or like show you like a bone and be like, hey, which bone is this? So it's just important to be prepared for like high stress, like type of interview rooms. And it's just good to know about that before, so you can like come with your game face on.
Yeah, I wanted to add a few things too. Definitely Zoom is different than being in person. So I've done a couple mock interviews, and something I notice a lot is people don't look at where their camera is. If I look above or if I look down, I'm not engaging you as the audience, and that takes practice. So practice as much as you can, practice smiling. If you just sit with your blank face, you're not going to look like you're engaged. You have to smile, you have to pull those cheeks up and make it look like you are listening, which hopefully you are. So practice that in your mock interviews and pay attention to whether or not you're looking at the camera, you're smiling. Also, it's hard to prepare for every single question they're going to ask you about, but one thing I found helpful was have certain memories from your rotation, medical memories, perseverance memories about themes, right? Like times you overcame a challenge, times you had an interesting patient, times you disagreed with someone or had to manage conflict, and just find memories to hold on to. That way, when they ask you questions, you're not necessarily regurgitating a answer to a question, but you're bringing up those memories and tying it into the themes that they're asking you about. And lastly, if you have a hard time coming up with questions, try to go to the social the night before or earlier. That way you learn a little bit about their program and can ask them specifically, hey, I heard you're expanding this aspect of your hospital, tell me about that. Or, hey, I heard you hired a couple new faculty in this specialty. Tell me about that. And that helps you also look engaged.
And then just piggybacking off of that, I just kind of had a Google Doc with the most common questions asked, and I kind of just like typed up my exact responses to them. And like I didn't memorize that, but just going through that process kind of helped me in the interview just be more on my feet. And then what was also helpful is just like taking a step back with some of the questions. Like they tend to ask specific questions, like tell me a specific instance in which you did this and that, or that and the third. And like I would typically just say, in general, my approach is this, because like that's what they want to know, like the meat of like whatever specifics they're getting into, and then from there you can like tell them the story. Because sometimes it's like hard to think of an instance like right off the top, but as you're like telling them how you would do it, you might come up with a story in that, and just communicating just like how just your general approach. So that's just what I wanted to add.
No, I completely agree with just kind of going through things, formulating those pathways for those questions beforehand, because it's almost like acting, right? If you memorize a script, then you can start showing your personality outside of it. I think there's only a couple things I really wanted to, I guess, drive home or memorize, or at least have rehearsed. So one of those things is tell me about yourself. It seems like an easy question, but in an intense interview, you can start trailing off. And so if you have that like clean and concise, it says a lot about you. And then about your research as well. If you can't talk about your research in a clear, concise way, they're going to shoot it down right away. So just have that prepared. Beyond that, just be yourself. One of the things that I was pretty helpful for me is I emailed or texted as many people as possible that I knew within the ortho world. What was the weirdest or hardest question that you got on the interview trail? And I just made a whole like notes of all those weird questions and came up with some weird answer for them. And even if it wasn't the same exact question, I had already formulated that like pathway of like how I would answer that. And I thought that was really helpful as well. And if you want that list, I can just reach out to me. I'm not going to send like the list of this whole like 96 people, but I thought it was really helpful to have that list of questions, weird questions.
Did anybody receive any, or were you asked any inappropriate or illegal questions, and what's your advice on sort of responding to those?
Yeah, I got asked, I would say, I think one inappropriate question I thought was inappropriate was based on like all the places you've interviewed so far, what's your number one? And I was like, I'm interviewing with you today, but that's awkward. So it was just like, what do you want me to say? And I think the way I navigated that was just like hyping up like a similar program to theirs and just saying like, I'm still working it out. Like I'm just like being vague and not like those types of questions, they catch you off guard and you're never going to be 100% prepared for them. But the way that I answered that question was talking more so about like things that I liked about my home program and like bringing it back to my values, like my top 3 things I look for in a program, and then applying it to what that program had to offer. And it was very vague, and I'm sure that's not what they wanted, but I feel like when you get those questions, you just kind of work around them. You keep a smile on your face, and then you make note about that program too for when you're making your rank list.
Yeah, I think during one of my interview preps, Dr. Samora from Ohio State, she gave me the interview from hell, where every question that you would not want to get, she gave me. And she was like, what would you say to this? And like, she'd be like, what would you say if they asked you, like, do you have any plans to get pregnant during residency? And she's like, like just bring out what all the worst case scenarios are. And I think the pathway that we kind of landed on, if I got asked one of these, was 2 things. You can either choose humor, and she was like, you could just like laugh it off, like, haha, I don't think you're supposed to ask me that, but I can answer if it's really important to you. And that was for like a program you really like. And then the other half would just be to answer it because it's not a big deal or shouldn't be a big deal. And she's like Nay said, like it's more a reflection of that program, and programs that ask that, maybe you don't want to be there. But for me, I don't want to call them illegal questions, because the ones that breached it were normal in conversation. I would have asked, like, because they're like, oh, like, why do you want to move here? Like, do you have a spouse or part, like, I don't know, like they wanted to kind of connect, and that's why it was going that direction. So just get the feel, like you're a good judge of character. There's some programs that are more suspicious than others.
Yeah, I think last year there were a lot of questions about diversity, which are not necessarily inappropriate, but some interviewers stepped lines into, male female ratios in ortho and my thoughts on that, or which is not necessarily inappropriate depending on how they phrase the question. I also had a question about like family planning, being a woman into a field that was going to be stressful on my family and personal work life. So there will be some questions. I don't know if our male colleagues had similar strange questions, but practicing for them is essential, and you're going to need this skill even once you start residency, right? I get patients asking me how old I am or inappropriate questions all the time, and learning how to swerve them politely is just a skill we need in this field.
Yeah, one guy asked me, he asked, is the hood in San Francisco same as the hood in Los Angeles, and is caring for those two populations the same? It was just a weird question. I don't know how to answer it, but just gotta, be adaptable, keep on going, keep smiling, and hopefully they just move on.
Perfect. What are some tips for the virtual sort of meet and greets? You know, did you guys try to log in and have like a question ready, or like were there times where you didn't ask anything? Were you trying to like take over the room? Like, talk about how you guys sort of reacted inside the virtual meet and greets.
I hate that I'm gonna say this because you guys are gonna think that I took over a room, because I just talk a lot. That's just my issue. But so here's the thing. The meet and greet I thought was my interview of them, because they're gonna have me for freaking 8 hours where they're gonna grill me and I was gonna be hot under the lights and everything. So the meet and greet, I kind of, I was engaging, but I kind of sat back and was like, so tell me about the traffic, like you ask those questions that you can't go ask the program director the next day, and make that your interview of them. So just as strong as you want to be, if they're giving the vibe that like it's a chill program, loosen up. I kind of was more like Friday brunch casual, like Saturday brunch casual, don't come in like a tie. I think I overdressed for Emory's. Everyone was in like jerseys and I was sitting there and so just definitely get the sense of your program, because I look like a mess, and dress accordingly so you kind of match the flow, but interview them during the meet and greet.
Just to kind of give my perspective, I feel like I took the opposite approach, just to be honest. I was just I was just present. I didn't necessarily ask too many questions. And I think, it's up to, whatever your vibe is, whatever your feel is. I don't think it necessarily hurts you to be there and not talk much, but I also don't think it necessarily hurts you to also ask the questions that you're curious about too. So just do whatever is comfortable for you, and don't try to force yourself to be somebody you're not during that time, because it's gonna be apparent that you're being like forcing it and being awkward.
I will say some programs incorporated their social throughout your interview day. It wasn't one event beforehand. And for those, if you're going to have multiple waiting rooms or more stagnant rooms in between interviews, have maybe a few extra questions, because I think the amount of questions dies down by the fourth-ish hour, and it's always super awkward being in a room and nobody's talking because nobody has questions. And remember that you can use the same questions if you're asking them to different people in different rooms. So just always try to have some conversation question or starter.
I don't have much to add to that, but these interviews can be tiring. So just make sure you still bring that same energy to the socials and meet and greets and things like that. Because I know some of them I just didn't even want to show up, but you have to show up, because the residents, as some programs, have a huge say, and as they should, because I think that builds good programs if you have good residents bringing in more good residents. And the other thing I would say is really kind of on a different note, but be aware of the time difference. So, I mean, like you could be interviewing at the crack of dawn, or you could be interviewing like in the middle of the night, depending on where you live and where you're interviewing. So just be aware of that, because that caught me off guard in a couple of my interviews, because my energy I wasn't ready for that. That's like, I don't operate at that time, but you have to. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I don't want to be logging on saying good morning and it's bedtime over there. It's kind of awkward. We are going to start winding down. I don't want to go too much longer. If you guys have questions that are like burning, feel free to post those. I probably got a couple more that I was going to ask. So let us know. Professional social media accounts, do you all have them? Do you recommend them?
Highly recommend. Highly recommend Twitter and Instagram. Highly recommend making a second account. Everybody doesn't have to do this. That's just my opinion, but I think people are gonna go searching for your account. So it's always good to give them one they can find easily, so they don't search for your personal one. And it's not like I have anything crazy on my personal one. It's just normal, but I just want to put the face that you want them to see out.
See, I
Okay,
took
I don't
that
have a
advice.
professional account. Oh, all you. I'm sorry.
I took the advice of I want them to see me who I am as who I am. So I didn't make a separate one. But in general, I try to keep my Twitter a little more profesh and my Instagram a little more like day-to-day activities of my life.
Yeah, I actually changed my Facebook name. I had like a different name on there, because I just don't want people looking up my past. Because I mean, my past isn't bad or anything, but it's just like, who knows if when I was in high school, I said something that I shouldn't have said with my immature mind. So in that season, I just had like a completely different name on Instagram. It's already private, so nobody can see. But again, I don't be posting scandalous stuff. I don't be getting into scandalous stuff, but you just never know. You don't want, you leave all stones unturned. Don't leave any stone unturned, so just going to leave y'all with that.
I took the same route. I went with the alias, went everything on private. I mean, now that I'm matched, I opened everything back up because I'm going to be me. But at that time, you just never know. I mean, some people, if you're Gabe, you can have your accounts. Everybody knows Gabe's a great guy, but I don't want anybody judging me. So
I went opposite. Hey, I guess contradict people now. I am like, Instagram's always been private just because it's just family and stuff and friends and Gabe. But everything else like Twitter, which I mostly spend my time on, that's all public. And I just made the decision that I wasn't gonna make it public, or I was gonna make it private, because I wanted them to know what they were getting themselves into, because sometimes I'm opinionated. And for most of the programs, I was going to be the first Black resident, and they would say that, Black women resident, and they would say that. So I was like, all right, so you're going to see what I post on my social media. And it's a lot about like rights and diversity. And if that makes you think something, then don't go. And I also post jokes, and it's just me. So it helps sort through, like they can decide if they like it or not, but just know, as like a professional social media FBI agent, we can always find something. So like Gabe has put it, saying, if you make it so easy and present what you want them to see, they won't dig deeper. But if you have nothing at all, I will find it.
That's
I
right.
agree.
I will say on that note, if there's anything about yourself that for no reason that you'll change, then stick with that. For me, at that time and still now, I knew like my hair was going to be it. And so it was actually a good filter for programs. Like if you saw my hair and you didn't like it, then I'm not going to that program. They're not inviting me, and I'm happy that they're not, because I don't want to be in a place that I'm not accepted. So if there's something about you that that is really a part of you, whether it's your ethnicity, the way you look, your religion, anything like that, don't hide it, because you're going to end up at a place that it's gonna be hell. Pardon my language, but like it's going to be bad. So you have to be there for 5-6 years. Just be you in certain respects, things that are non-negotiable.
Yeah, before you the interview season starts, just go through your social media, filter out anything that even looks mildly suspicious for whatever, and just make sure that if your mom or whatever was looking at your Instagram, they would approve. And that's kind of how I went about it. I didn't make a professional Instagram account. I already had a professional Twitter from from undergrad. They made me do that. I was like an engineering major, but I just kind of kept that and then followed a bunch of medical people, and now it's my med Twitter account. But yeah, just make it family friendly, but also like Stephen said, make sure that it's reflective of who you are. You don't want them matching you and then finding out you're a whole completely different person. You don't want that for yourself either.
And then I'll ask Gabe this more specifically. How do you reach out to residents and stay connected without being annoying?
Yeah, so I thought, one of the most important things was to, set like, I think Kaleshi mentioned this in the chat. Just send them a short blurb, like saying, this is who I am and I'm interested in your program. If you have time, I would love to speak. And if they get back to you, then they get back to you, and you continue to follow up with them. But if they don't get back to you, I would shy away from, sending too many follow-up emails to residents who, haven't responded to you, because, that can tend to be annoying. But if somebody responds to you, especially if they respond quickly, I would say, okay, this is someone who's interested in speaking with me, someone who's interested in helping. Let me, continue to maintain this relationship. And then, if y'all end up speaking on the phone, and you can always tell if you have a good vibe with somebody. If I had a good vibe with somebody, that would be someone who I would, continue to hit up, continue to, text and see what their thoughts were about where my head was. But if, we spoke on the phone and the vibe wasn't necessarily so good, then, I would probably, take a step back in terms of reaching out to that person.
And does anybody have any advice for first or second year medical students, just sort of getting an early start in the process?
I would say, sorry, I feel like I've been talking a lot. I would say get a good foundation. There are certain things that are kind of in your control, and then certain things that are not. If you know you're not a great test taker, or that you struggle with standardized exams, I sort of felt that way by myself. I just made step one, and now for you guys, it'll be some other measures, but a big part of my foundation, and knowing that I wanted that to be something I had more control over, and I sacrificed a lot to be able to get a decent score on that. And then get in touch with people early on, whether it's the orthopedic department. As soon as you realize, oh wait, okay, I'm interested in ortho, let them know who you are, put your face out there, and touch base with them, follow up regularly, give them updates about what you're doing, ask, am I on the right track? Do I need to be doing more research? Am I good here? And then that's enough just for them to know you're interested, and they're gonna guide you in the right direction. So just set that foundation and then get your name out there.
And just a plug for those who are later to the game. I didn't decide on ortho until closer to sub-I season. There's hope, just do your best on your sub-Is. You might not know as much, given that, you didn't really, that wasn't your focus for the prior years, but you just come in, work hard, smile, and, just be affable. They'll really appreciate that. It goes beyond knowing things, just because we're so red, just a lower stage of our education when it comes to ortho. They don't expect too much out of us in that department, but they just want to make sure that, they're going to enjoy working with us going forward. And so just put your best foot forward and be yourself, have fun with it.
Yeah, like Olivia mentioned in the chat, the interns and the newer residents who are just coming in are going to be chiefs and fours by the time you apply. So it's definitely a good idea to reach out to them, especially if you're just starting out as well. And y'all can both be new to the program or the city and talk about that. One of the ways in which that I got close to the residents at my home program was just straight up playing pick up basketball with them. I was on the ortho flag football team. Not saying you got to play sports with them, but just like if there's other ways you can connect with them besides just just talking about school all day. If you actually can form like a genuine relationship with the residents too, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree with like forming those genuine relationships early on. I mean, you'll hear people say you need to go. Shadowing's great. Any of going to grand rounds, those are just don't kill yourself doing that. I mean, in my opinion, at least, I kind of took the same approach where I just knew that, maybe standardized test taking wasn't going to be like, a strength for me. So I decided to just put my head down and, just make sure that that was something I could check off and didn't really make it a priority to go to grand rounds or anything like that. Because I think one of the reasons you do that is to show face so that they remember you. But I know personally, I have a very common name, Steven, but wherever I go, people remember my name. So if I was gonna make an impression, I wanted it to be a good one. And so I knew I wanted to focus on boards. And then whenever I popped up, people will remember me regardless. And I wanted it to be for a good reason. So just like know yourself and how you approach this game. Yeah, that would be my general advice for, the other thing that I heard an upperclassman say to a lowerclassman medical school is download the ERAS application right now and see what they're looking for. I thought that was pretty good advice. I mean, it might be helpful for some more than others, but one of the things that was interesting is there's really no leadership section. It's like volunteer, and then you can put your leaderships, things that you did under there, but it kind of gives you an idea of the priorities of schools you're applying to, like what they're looking for in applicants. So that's something that could be beneficial as well.
All right, and final question, let you guys go. I know you've realized now that you started residency that time is of an essence. So what's one thing that you guys have learned like throughout the process that you wish you knew before it started?
I'll go ahead. This is the same thing I've learned from my first weekend at Grady. Sometimes you can't plan for things. You just got to jump into it and you'll figure it out. Interviews, after every interview I passed out on the couch and slept for like 4 hours. Like it's exhausting. You'll get through it. And and maybe that's part of it too. They just want to like exhaust you and see how you, you react. But yeah, so you can't plan for everything, plan for what you can, and then just trust your gut because it's gonna be what carries you throughout residency anyway.
I think one thing that resonates with me now that I wish like someone had told me earlier was, you got to have, I guess, the general sense that everybody always talks about how difficult it is and how impossible it is, but we got to also realize that it is possible and it is doable. I think a lot of the advice that people give to people is negative advice, like saying, oh, you can't do this, oh, like with your scores so and so. I think there needs to be a culture of support, and sometimes we just need to hear it is doable. Oh yes, this might be difficult, but it is possible. So just like try not to be so hard on yourself. Try and just take a step back and realize that this is possible. So and so has done it. Why can't you? So just it sounds corny, but believe in yourself because you can. Every single person on this call can do it.
And to add to that, medicine in general is really bad at celebrating your successes. And I know right now you guys are on the end goal of match day, but there's a lot that builds up to that. And be proud of yourself for every little thing that you've checked off so far. You've done step 1, you did that. You're doing rotations, you passed all your classes in med school. Like every little thing that gets you to match day is just as important as match day. So don't get so bogged down in the details and forget that you're awesome and you're killing it.
Just to piggyback off that, yeah, so much of it is just perspective. You all have made it to medical school. People will give an arm and a leg to be in our positions, and you guys are continuing to go forward. Have that perspective, have confidence in yourself. You're chosen for a reason, and just keep it pushing. Just try and be kind to as many people as you can, and always do the right thing, and it'll work out. So I just wanted to leave you with that.
one thing I wish I knew kind of going in is everybody looks like they have it together when you're interviewing, when you're on the trail, and we all put on this like image of ourselves that's like the best version of ourselves that we could possibly be, but we're all just figuring this out and it's not easy. So just kind of echoing what everybody said, give yourself grace and also try not to compare yourself to other people as much because that's hard and naturally that's what we do to try to see where we stand in the whole process. But take an objective look at yourself and focus on you. And the more you do that, like meet your own standards, and then you can never like disappoint yourself. So yeah, give yourself grace with that.
What I'll say is just thing that gave me comfort was, or it was pretty much two things. It was the support system. So start building that support system now, whether it's through groups that you're in or people that you've known for 20 years, whatever that is, just make sure they're close to you right now, especially in this process, because they'll continue to uplift you because they know how hard you work and what you did to get here. The other thing that gave me comfort is like, there's so many unknown variables in this, just control what you can control. We've talked about some of those things that you can control. How many schools should I apply to? At the end of the day, nobody, I mean, somebody might be paying for nobody was paying for my applications, but like, just like you apply to as many schools as you think you need to, continue to work hard, try to get those scores that you need. But anything can happen on a test day, anything can happen during the interview cycle, but control the things that you can control. And at the end of the day, you just need to be happy with that. I know it's easier said than done, especially as you get closer to match, but looking back, I would give myself the same advice because otherwise you're just going to be unnecessarily stressed.
All right, perfect. And before we close, I think Dr. Carson wanted to make a comment as well.
Hey, I want to thank everybody for coming online tonight. This is kind of Justin and Josh have done a phenomenal job of putting this together today. I've pretty much listened to the thing, and I listened to this in entirety. Incredible amount of information has been shared amongst the fourth year students. The Gladden Society is always here to assist you in any way possible. We're soon to have a residency assembly for residents. Obviously, this was very based off the medical school. Medical student aspect of things, particularly the fourth year students, but I think there was some great information that was given for first year students on. We're an organization that's really here to prosper you in any way possible, both as mentorships and sponsorships going forward. Invaluable amount of information that we can then convey to you all. So please, please, please use us. We're all extremely busy, particularly all the residents who are on the line today. They're very, very busy, but if you drop them an email, they will respond to you. And I will say the word is persistence because I'm busy also. I can't tell you how many medical students I mentor, how many residents I mentor per year. But in saying that, I would tell you all to be persistent. These are some young brothers and sisters that are truly dedicated to you and your success going forward. So thank you everybody for coming on the line tonight. Justin and Josh, you all, and the whole crew of you all have done a phenomenal job of conveying incredible amount of information. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Carson. And thanks to all our panelists too. You guys are great, you're experts. I'm sure you're like crushing it now as interns. We're here for you too. So most of you have my number, reach out for questions anytime. It doesn't matter if it's an x-ray that you're not sure about, studying for OID, reach out. Please join. We have more content and things coming. There's also benefits to members that aren't available. And to all the students, good luck, stay positive, communicate. Okay. Thanks, everybody.